Welcome to the campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we bring you part 2 of our series entitled The Art of Living, a Mindset. I would like to recognize the North Idaho College Convocation Series Committee for bringing this outstanding series to our campus and to thank them for providing those guests to our program. Today we're very honored to have with us Dr. Burton L. White. He is the founder and the director of the Center for Parent Education. Dr. White is regarded as the country's foremost authority on the education development of both infants or toddlers. It is a subject that he has studied for the past 25 years. He has also been the director of the Harvard Preschool Project that was undertaken over a 13-year period. Dr. White is well published in his field, as well as touring the country speaking on this very, very important subject. He has written, among other works, a book entitled The First 3 Years of Life and A Parent's Guide to the First 3 Years. He is also, as I've indicated, published in other areas, including 4 major textbooks and a number of articles. He is with us today to pursue this subject and to address the issue of children and their development and how that affects later life. Dr. White, on behalf of the staff, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our program.
It's a delight to be here.
As always, I'm happy to have regular panelists, Janelle Burke, an attorney, and also the law clerk for the 1st Judicial District of the state of Idaho, and I shall invite Janelle to commence the questioning.
Dr. White, it is indeed a pleasure to have you here. Can you begin the program by sort of giving us an overview as to why those first 3 years of our life is important?
Well, I started shortly after leaving Army service in the early 50s to pursue a very idealistic and fundamental question, and that is, where do well-developed people come from? Because I'd become convinced in my first couple of decades of living that the most important thing in life for anybody was the caliber of the people you interact with. I abandoned an early career in engineering and went into the field of psychology, trying to find some answers, and found everything I learned about psychological research pointed to the early experiences of the human being as being absolutely fundamental in determining how much of your innate potential you realize during your lifetime. And as I moved towards the field of education, I learned some startling facts. Your condition at age 3 with respect to your ability to think and your command of language, mostly at the receptive end, not speech, but what you understood, was extraordinarily predictive as to what you'd look like on those dimensions when you entered school at 6 years and how well you were likely to do in the next 4 or 5 years. And sadly, in a sense, it turns out that if you're delayed at 3 in those 2 dimensions, if you have the talent of a child 9 months older and no more, you already have a developmental deficit that we ordinarily don't overcome, ever. This made it very obvious to me that the focus on the beginning and optimal development from the beginning was a much wiser investment than assuming that we could undo problems later on.
What then are some of the clues to a healthy, happy baby or a healthy, happy person in those first few years?
Well, first of all, let me mention where my suggestions come from. They don't come out full-blown out of my own mind or out of theorists like Freud or Jung or and so forth. They come mostly from our own research and that of the Swiss student Piaget. And our own research in particular has focused on nature's successes. We have gone into homes, rich and poor alike, and watched children take shape over the first years of life, with particular attention to those who ended up doing wonderfully well at 3. Not just bright children, but delightful, secure human beings. And noticed, as well as we could analyze them, the differences, the principal differences in the history of experience of the children from birth to the 3rd birthday, between children who did develop so beautifully and others who fell behind. That's the preamble. What are some of the suggestions? Well, Turns out that parents are the most influential factors in shaping that child. There isn't any question in my mind whatsoever, and in the minds of most other students of the process. It's not what you watch on television, it's not what happens in a daycare center, it's what the parents do in structuring the experiences of the child, in feeding into the process or not feeding into it. And parents in the first few months, the first 6 or 7 months, even without any help, and we don't give them much, manage to get through those months producing a child who looks pretty good at 6 or 7 months. But from 6 or 7 months on, the picture changes dramatically, and we do much less well by our children than we might. And sometimes we build pretty substantial deficits.
And in what ways would you say we build substantial deficits?
Well, there are several ways. One of the principal ways is in a very common response to the increase in danger and stress that comes when a baby can move about on her own. It's very different living with a 9-month-old than a 4-month-old. A 4-month-old placed on a rug stays there. Kind of boringly, but stays there. A 9-month-old is like a kitten or a puppy who's just learned to walk. They're into everything. And the human animal has more curiosity than any other and has to have a lot of it and goes out and explores the world. But they're not prepared for the world they enter into. Apartments and homes are designed for adults, not for crawling babies who are clumsy, who explore with the mouth, who are impulsive. So accidental poisonings peak in the 7-month to 24-month period, and so do accidental falls. A natural, loving reaction to that state of affairs is to cage the child. Put him in a playpen and throw in 10 toys. Child will be safe. This is not the way to raise children. Children developing very well live in a home that's been modified, made safe for them and from them, I might add, and then are encouraged to get out there and see the world, climb, master your body, learn how useful people are when you're stuck up on the sofa and are afraid to try to get down, and so forth. That's one of the dramatic differences between parenting styles of those who are successful and those who aren't so successful.
I have just one more comment, and that is with regard to second children and first children. The first child, of course, the parent is new at this business. The second child, what happens to that child? Are they more secure? Do you find in your studies that that child is more secure because the parents are perhaps a little more relaxed?
There's a lot behind that question that doesn't meet the eye. It is true that the first child has inexperienced teachers who are more anxious than the second child, than the parents of the second child. On the other hand, the first child has an undiluted adult environment. And it turns out, interestingly, that we've always found first children excel more than subsequent children in school and other endeavors. We've also found something that people really were surprised at. They do better in their early social relationships than those who have sibs at home. Other things we've learned is that 2-year-old children normally do not enjoy 1-year-old competition in their own home. And I tell a story to illustrate that. You are a 23-year-old woman, married for a year, being treated wonderfully well, and one day your husband comes home and says, "Honey, I've got great news for you. Next week I'm going to bring another woman home to live with us. She'll be full-grown, a little better looking than you, a little younger than you. Naturally, I'll pay more attention to her than to you. She's going to be our second wife, and I want you to love her." Most women would take to that very, very badly. And those are the dynamics underneath the feelings of the disgruntled 2-year-old with a 1-year-old in the home. If you really want to enjoy parenting, and if you really want to have your child enjoy being a child, and if you want the best results, space your children 3 or more years apart.
Dr. White, when you spoke to our student body today, it was a most stimulating address. You indicated that in the first few months of life that a new child has 3 essential elements that should be part of that development. I was very impressed with those comments. Would you share with our viewers what a child needs, the 3
Yes, we
essentials?
characterize the goals of education as clearly as we can, and we distinguish the goals for the first 7 months of life and the goals for the balance of the first 3 years. In the first 7 months, you start with the absolute essential goal of helping the child through experience to what we call interpersonal security, or a feeling of being loved. It seems obvious on the face of it what it is. If you don't have it at 7 months, you're in huge difficulty. You'll never love another person well for the rest of your life. So this is the most important goal of all. Second, there are certain simple skills, a short list of them, that a baby of 7 months has acquired from birth. And third, there's curiosity. Every baby, in his interest in the human eyes and so forth, the eye area, and in his own fist and subsequently fingers, shows during the first months of life the innate curiosity of the healthy animal. You want to see a lot of that at 7 months. Turns out that most of our kids, even those who give us fits in the 3rd and 4th grade, do quite well in the first months for reasons I haven't time to go into here. But subsequently, when they turn that corner and become mobile and the stress goes up, parents then find the job is often more than they bargained for, and whether they're aware of it or not, they don't do as well as they could do and would like to do if we had a different educational system. We really do a terrible job by our young parents and our young children in this country.
I always think of this program as an attempt to help the viewers who are watching, and with this great expertise that you have, we're very fortunate to be able to ask this question. What advice do you have to parents in relation to the first 7 months and those 3 essential parts of development, and then later? What I'd like to ask you to do is to take some time, and please feel free to take that time, to advise parents on what to do in the first 7 months and then what should change and what is added as their responsibilities.
Well, the first order of business is for parents not to believe immediately everything I say. There are too many people who talk about how to raise children who really don't know what they're talking about. The subject is very important, and so they should be careful about accepting guidance from anybody, including me. Right? That's the first order of business. Second, having gotten that out of the way, let me then say that in the beginning, the 2 things that parents really have to be mindful about in the first 7 months, other than just behaving naturally and lovingly with their children, have to do with the rather common mild to moderate hearing losses that come from congestion and fluid in the middle ear and allergic responses to, and also extensive use of substitute care. The mild to moderate hearing losses chronically afflict normal young children. Medical professionals don't respond adequately to them. They're not sufficiently informed as to the learning consequences of being congested. So you must be very careful. You must push for good attention to the problem. Pediatric audiologists, for example, are the key professionals if you're having trouble with your medical practitioner. Push for it. Second, substitute care. Too many young parents have bought a bill of goods that suggests that putting their babies at a month or 2 of age into 9-hour-a-day group care or other substitute care is good for the baby. That's hogwash. The best people to raise babies in the first 6 months, in fact the first 3 years, are only 6 people in the world, the parents and grandparents. It's because they have a devotion to that child that cannot be purchased, and it's absolutely essential if you want to heighten the probability of a good outcome. Right? Beyond that, lavishing attention on a child in the first 6 to 7 months is the key ingredient. You don't have to worry about much else. After that, however, your job gets more difficult. There are 3 tasks, 3 parts to the job. One is to provide interesting things to do. To do that, you've got to know what interests babies, and that changes as the child changes rapidly in those years. One of the ways of getting most of that job done is to safety-proof the home and turn the kid loose. That'll do 85% of the job right there. Right? The other piece of it is to be around a lot, because the second part of the job is to be a personal consultant to the child. You comfort the child, you facilitate things, help them over obstacles, and you share the excitement of discovery. And there's a tremendous amount of that in the life of every healthy baby. Finally, the third is probably the most important thing, and that's introducing the child to the world of people. Children have to learn how to relate to other people. We, among other things, for example, work very hard to avoid spoiling a child. It's very easy to turn out a smart 2-year-old. It's very difficult to turn out a delightful person to live with. And one of the clues to it, to give you a sample, is teach your child that she is very, very special indeed. She is precious and dearly loved, but she's no more special than any other person in the world, especially you.
Thank you. Janelle Burke.
This is all very interesting. One of the real questions, though, is that this child from birth to 3 years old is going to be in a home that it had no choice about. Mm-hmm. In other words, those years that are most important to its development are in a location that it didn't choose.
True.
What do you say about that, and what do you think can be done to cut our losses as to children who are in a home, and perhaps there are things going on in that home for one reason or another that do not tend to help the development of the child? How can we cut our losses?
Well, to take an extreme case, on the Indian reserves in Canada, they have long ago given up the notion of trying to help parents who are both seriously afflicted with alcoholism in child rearing. There's no way they could support such parents and do justice to the child's needs. So they try to get the child out of the home. When it gets extreme enough, that's what I think you have to do. But you wouldn't want to do that in democratic societies without great care and without great provocation. And so what I advocate is what we're doing in Missouri, which I think is a sign of what's going to happen. The public educational system conceives of the first teachers of a child to be his parents. And like any teachers, they need to know what they're doing, and they need backup services and proper working conditions. We provide them in Missouri. We offer the program free to everybody starting to raise a family. We give them pre-service training, in-service training, assessment, and referral services and support. That's what we need to do.
Is this a part of your educational system, or is this a part of your public health system?
Strictly educational. You see, right now our public educational system assumes there's no need to educate, to spend money before the kid's 6 years old. That's dumb. There's no other word to describe it. Because considering our poor track record with making do and making up for poor development in the first years, to wait till they're 6 makes no sense at all. We have a terrible weakness in our leadership in this country, and in other countries, I must say, in terms of a sane, modern approach to how you educate a new human being. It's got to start from the beginning.
I've often heard it said, whether a young child or an older child, that they are very fond of their parents and will naturally turn to this adult to whom they're bonded. That would be true as well in cases where they're mistreated or in cases where they're just neglected. Do you have a comment as to that bonding process that goes on even when the parent may not be the best parent possible?
Oh yes, the human animal has been around for a long time, millions of years. And we have evolved in certain ways which are deeply ingrained within us, and there's nothing we can do about it. One part of that whole picture is the need that every new human has to have somebody out there attached to them, because otherwise the human isn't going to survive. And babies' vulnerabilities, the piercing quality of their cry, the totally irresistible quality of their smile and their laugh, all those things conspire to have somebody fall in love with them. And it's so important for that to happen that even if somebody beats them up moderately every day, the baby will still attach to that person. They've just got to do it. No choice.
Is it more important to continue that bonding, or is it more important to remove the child from that kind of a situation?
That's a little Solomonic, if I may say so. It's like saying, would you save your wife or your firstborn if they were both drowning? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't.
It's a weighing
But I'm glad you
process.
asked it, because I can say I don't know something. And I think experts, quote, have to strike their colors on that one.
Caroline Bird was on our program last week, and she was agreeing with some of the things that you're saying, and certainly you have made it so clear, I think, and I commend you for making it so clear that the parents have such a vital role in the future generations, what to do with children. And she indicated when here that the most important thing that we do in society is the rearing of children, but we pay for that less than anything, whereas some of the areas where we put so much of our money in occupations, she feels where there's less going on. I guess I have a two-part question. One, do you agree with that, and would you recommend that we do something in our economic structure to correct that problem? And then the second part of the question would deal with, should we try to deal what you're dealing with in more detail in this country to have some kind of qualifications or education prior to people becoming parents? There are no qualifications other than biologically being able to produce children.
Those are two very good questions. They really are. I don't believe anything much more strongly than I believe what Caroline Bird said about the first issue. It just seems so obvious to me that life itself depends on the caliber of the human beings you interact with. It's as simple and as fundamental as that. You can make up as many systems of controlling human beings as you want, but humans have always been creative enough to bypass systems. If you can trust a person, if you can expect kindness from them, some degree of competence, humor, and so forth, you got something going for you. Otherwise, you've got nothing. It's a little bit like a marriage. Would you refresh me on the second part of your question?
Yes, and the second part is that since this is so vital, should we try to deal more with some kind of qualifications and training for those persons before becoming parents?
Well, I think so. I think any fair-minded look at the picture is going to lead you to the conclusion that not only do parents have rights, but children have rights too. They have a right to a fair shot at things. We had a judge in Iowa a couple of years back remove 2 boys from a home because the parents were both retardates. His justification was, there's no way those kids can get a fair shake in life if they're brought up by people who are very, very weak intellectually. Well, that's, that reaches for tough issues, because in our society we are mindful of the rights of families. We don't want government pushing families around, etc. And it's one of those crunch areas. But I at the very least think that the educational system can come into the picture and provide the preparation and assistance, and we can do a heck of a lot better than we're doing while avoiding that kind of a crunch.
So if we made it even a required curriculum within our educational system, as people are going through at least secondary
school.
Oh
no, that's hopeless.
Is that hopeless?
Too many people think that high school courses make sense, they're going to make a big difference. It's too little, too soon. 15-year-old boys are more interested in making babies than in raising babies. What you've got to do is to get to people when the motivation is at its highest, which is as soon as possible after the young couple has learned they're expecting their first child, and you've got to stay with them through it. You can't just have a couple of weeks of this stuff and turn them loose. And the perfect model is what we're doing in Missouri. It is a beautiful, workable, appreciated model.
Let's go a little bit into that, and then I'll go back to Janelle. But I am so interested in that and trying to be helpful for possibly spreading the word as you're indicating. Tell us a little more about what you do in Missouri with parents to assist them.
All you have to do as somebody who's been around education for a while is to think of what you would do in any teaching situation. We want the teachers to know what they're doing. We want them to know the nature of the student they're dealing with. We want them to have feedback from some sort of assessment program. We want them to know where they can turn for special purposes. And we want them to have reasonable working conditions. Those are the elements in any educational system, no matter what the age of the student. Right? So our teachers have to know about babies. Babies change very rapidly between birth and 3 years of age. What you can think about for a 2-month-old bears no resemblance to what a 2-year-old is interested in, or at least very, very little. So they have to learn about the rapid changes in the child. They also have to learn about the developmental processes that are undergoing once-in-a-lifetime development. Language, the emergence of thinking ability and mental agility, the shaping of the human person as a social animal. These are once-in-a-lifetime things. They've got to know when. They've got to know that when the 9-month-old child is crawling around on the floor with a piece of cookie and goes, to the adult, what she means is, excuse me there, I seem to be running low on this stuff. I understand you could get me more, might be willing. Would you get me some more? This is the emergence of a very important social skill, using an adult as a resource. Right? So we want to teach all that. That's curriculum content within teacher training. Right? Then we have assessments that are simple, that anybody can do, where we keep tabs on all major progress during the first 3 years. We promise parents nothing can go wrong without you knowing about it right away. You don't have any big risks. And if you need something, we'll show you where to go for the special input. And on top of that, we're sympathetic to what stresses are normal for parents as they raise children. We encourage cooperative babysitting. We encourage part-time use of child care after 6 months. We encourage shared parenting, men and women. No reason why men shouldn't be involved in this action. Right? So we have a coherent, simple-minded kind of a system. And you've never seen more appreciative clients than the parents in that state. They just love it.
Janelle Berg.
A lot of what you've said I relate to, both as being a child, as we've all been, and also as being a mother. But the question that I have for you deals with your earlier statement that one of the things that you need to do after that 7-month period until the 3-year period is to do what interests the child, find out what interests the child, and do those things. How do you know what interests the child? For example, I might like to read, and I do. So, but perhaps that isn't what my child wants to do. And how do you avoid that confrontation between parent and child?
Good question. The older we get, the more variable we become, such that our particular tastes get to be our own, and the range of things we could do gets to be broader, and so forth. The younger the human animal is, the more alike they are. For example, every human being is crazy about a variety of things at certain stages of life in the first 3 years. Every newly crawling child loves to climb stairs. I don't know why, but they do. Everyone we've ever seen loves to flush toilets. They love to turn on radios and television sets, especially when they get immediate feedback. The most popular toy for all kids in the 2nd year of life are balls. And you can count on most children to enjoy balls. Hand-eye skills and play with the hands and under the guidance of the eye are universally interesting to children between 2 months and 2 years. So books with thick pages and spiral bindings are manipulative challenges for the 1-year-old. The point is, we know things today we never knew before. That information is available to both professionals and parents. They got to go out and get it, because we as an educational system don't give it to them, which of course makes no sense to me. It's there, you got to go out and chase it. If you know something about not only what is universal to children, but some of the variations among them, it's not hard to find out what that child that you have would like to do.
I also would like to ask you a question in just the very short remaining time that we have with regard to the freedom of thinking of the 3-year-old. How can we keep this delightful ability to think about anything and be so creative? How can we keep that alive on into the years?
Well, the next time you have a guest who is an expert on children over 3, you can ask that question of the guest. But if the child is 3 years and 1 week, I'm out of my league.
How about during the earlier years, though? They're very creative.
During
How
the
can
earlier
we just
years,
let them go?
The worst thing you can do is to set an agenda for the child and say, you ought to learn to read by the time you're 2 1/2, or do mathematics. If you can provide for freedom of access to the majority of the home, if you can have in reserve a variety of toys that children really like, but only held in reserve, and if above all you can accompany that child as they explore and discover and share the enthusiasm and facilitate things, you won't have any problems at all having a free-thinking 3-year-old.
With that, I must interrupt, and Dr. White, on behalf of our staff, I want to thank you for coming. And in indicating that, I want to say that we've been doing this program a long time, and from time to time we have a very special guest. And the reason I say that is they provide us so much valuable information, and you certainly fit that category, and we are grateful that you came by today.
Well, thank you so much.
I also express my appreciation to Janelle Burke for her fine questions. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. Burton White, who is the founder and director of the Center for Parent Education. He is a renowned expert in this country on education development of infants up to age 3, and I hope you've enjoyed the program as much as we have. We believe that we have brought you such a valuable program with a very excellent expert. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this very same time, and until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.